All right, today we're going to be servicing a 1995 Kawasaki Bayou 300 four-wheeler. This is a two-wheel drive model, so we won't need to change the front differential, but we will change the engine oil, spark plug, rear differential, and air filter. So first thing we're going to do is drain the engine oil. That takes a little bit longer, so we start with that. Kind of let this drain while we're doing some other stuff here, but grab an oil pan, put it directly underneath of the four-wheeler, and then you'll want a 17mm socket along with a socket wrench. And then in that skid plate, you'll find a notch out where that drain bolt sits, and then you can get your socket on there. Sometimes these get rounded off, and it's kind of facing back slightly, so keep that in mind when you go to loosen it up. It's not directly straight up and down. Get your oil pan underneath of there, and then go ahead and spin that out. You want to make sure that it's got a crush washer on there. I'll pull that drain plug out and show you that crush washer, but make sure that comes off with it. Make sure that doesn't fall down into that oil pan. And once it starts draining there, just let it sit there and run. Crush washer that I was telling you about is the silver piece on this drain bolt here, and that should be replaced every couple of oil changes. If you have one sitting around, they're not expensive. You can replace it every time, but sometimes that'll cause your drain bolt to leak if that crush washer has been used too many times. Next, we're going to pull that engine oil filter, and you can, a lot of times, I might have to use a different oil pan for this, but go ahead and grab a 8mm sockets to do that. Just goes a little bit quicker. 2 8mm, and then a lot of times that oil, unless your oil has drained for quite a while, a lot of times you'll still have quite a bit come out of this oil filter area. You will want to make sure you start your four-wheeler up and run it for a minute or two before you do this service. That just moves oil around, kind of picks up what debris is stuck on the bottom. So there's your oil filter cover there. That's off. We've got your oil filter here. And it looks like, I'll turn it a little bit so you can see it. I don't want to get everything, oil all over everything, but there's your oil filter. And you've got an oil valve running through this that you'll want to take off of this oil filter and put it through your new oil filter. And there is the relief valve that runs all the way through that oil filter. So you want to make sure that that goes in your new one. And you can see in your oil filter cover here, the tapered side of the shaft here is going to go out. So you're going to, when you stick that oil filter on there, it doesn't matter which side your oil filter goes in, but you do want this post, the smaller side out. The smaller side will go into the oil filter cover. Now once we got the oil draining there, we can let it drain for a couple minutes, and then pull your oil filter cap up here, and that is right above the right foot peg, and it's going to hold 1.7 liters. Now, if you pull the oil filter, a lot of times it's going to hold a little bit more than that. That 1.7 is generally with that oil filter not replaced, but you always want to replace that oil filter. So 1.7, I mean, it's going to be less than 2 quarts is what you're going to need. But you can start with 1.7 liters. And then right above the foot peg, and I'll hold it up here so you can see a little bit better, is your inspection window. And that's right here, if you can see. The spring's in the wrong place for you to see, but the inspection window's over here. And you want it, there's 2 lines on that inspection window. You want to fill that oil level up right in between those lines. Now, obviously put your oil filter back in, put your drain plug back in, make sure those are secure and tight, and then you will put engine oil in. Again, put the 1.7 or close to that in. See where it's at in the inspection window. You want to start and run it for a minute, and then you want to let it sit for a little bit, see where that engine oil drops down to on that sight window. If you need to add more, do that if needed. Next, we're going to change the spark plug, and we've got the spark plug up here, and we're going to pull the cap here. This is a NGK spark plug, is what's in it from the factory. I like to use NGK plugs. Just pull that cap off. It should be snug on there. If it's not snug, you want to replace this cap here. Grab an 18mm socket and put it on there, and then use your wrench here to loosen that spark plug. And it's an NGK, it's a DPR8 EA9. And I'll say that again, NGK, and it's a DPR8 EA9. Once you get it loosened up a couple turns, a lot of times you can leave the socket on there and then just spin your socket so you're not having to use your ratchet wrench the whole time. Spark plug should be replaced. I like to do it every time we service it. As far as intervals, I can get you that information. I'm not sure when they suggest doing it, but I just do it every time. They're $3 or $4 from any parts store, and you don't ever want it looking like that. So if you replace it every time, you just know that it's done, and you know that it's ready for the next service. One other thing I want to note too about changing engine oil, make sure you take a rag, wipe off around the plug before you remove this plug. We already did that before this video, so there's no debris around it. That's why I forgot to mention that. But you want to make sure you clean it off really good before you remove that plug, because engine oil or dirt will fall down into that engine. You don't want that. This is your clutch cover here, which is where that oil funnels down into, and then it disperses it all over that bottom end. Now for your air filter here, we've got 4 clips, 2 on the sides here, and then we have 2 in the front. Pull those clips, pull the oil, air filter off. Obviously, this air filter has been removed, so we've got to remove it. We can clean it, and you want to replace the foam filter. To remove this filter, you just pull this Phillips screw here on this side, and then once you get this housing and the filter off, then there's another Phillips screw on this back plate here, and then you can pull that foam. You don't ever want to run it like this without foam on there. And then once you have that foam filter cleaned or replaced, make sure you use air filter foam, air filter oil to put back in there. We're gonna go to the back now and replace rear differential oil. Now this one here, they actually, the previous owner had taken, and obviously they lost this cap, or for whatever reason they put a rubber cap in there. That is not how it's supposed to look like. It's supposed to have probably a 22 millimeter cap on here you pull off, and then you've got a 17 millimeter drain plug underneath here. And again, the skid plate kind of blocks so you can see it, but there is a hole in the bottom of that skid plate to where you can pull that 17 millimeter drain plug, let the oil drain out, put the drain plug back in, and then use a long funnel and fill it up from here. When the oil gets to the bottom of this fill cap, you know it's full. Obviously, you're not going to be able to keep on filling past that point, but if the four-wheeler is on level ground, fill to the bottom of this cap here, and then put that fill cap back in, and you're all set. That is just as easy as it gets to fill in that, and it takes less than a half a quart. It does not take very much oil at all. Comment in my messages, and I can tell you what kind of oil I'd recommend using in this rear differential. Adjusting the brakes now. This is your rear brakes over here, and we've got a wing nut here. You want to make sure there is some free play in there, because if there's no free play at all, then you will ruin your brake shoes. This is a brake shoe setup, and it's a mechanical brake is what they call it. So you've got 2 cables running up to just behind the foot peg there, the brake pedal, and it's hard to see, but there is a splitter there, and that is how it's adjusted. So you adjust it right here with these wing nuts. You spin it until you are tight, and then you back it off a couple turns, and then do the same on this other side, which is right near the differential. Do the same on this side, then go to your foot peg, touch it a couple times, make sure that there is free play, but make sure that it engages where you want it to, which is generally You want a little bit of free play at the foot peg as well, so an inch or two before it starts engaging. That way, if your foot is ever resting on it accidentally, you're not sitting there engaging your brakes. And that is service on a Kawasaki Bayou 300 four-wheeler.